means that the number one pick in the 2021 NBA draft goes to the Detroit Pistons.
Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft? Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft?
Basketball!
Select Isaiah Stewart.
The Detroit Pistons select Killian Hayes.
Sadiq, that was absolutely sensational.
I don't know what went into that process. I met the criteria to be selected, but I wasn't.
From long range. Oh! Yes!
Detroit Basketball! Pistons fans, and welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano, and joining me is Aaron Johnson, and back off his hiatus is Jasper Apollonia. Fellas, good to all be back, right?
Oh, for sure. Always miss Jasper. His energy level and storytelling is just something that Mike, you and I, we really can't match that. So good to have Jasper back, and I know he's going to have some interesting stuff for us to include in our discussion today.
I wish I did. I've been sick kind of for the last week and working. I've done nothing fun, nothing interesting. I do still have that too many coffees, wink, wink, nudge, nudge energy going for me at the same time. So that hasn't gone out of my repertoire whatsoever. I'm happy to be back. I did listen to the podcast last week. I was waiting for that shout out and I got it. So, you guys are still on my good side.
And then he stopped listening right after that.
Oh, 100% turned it right off. But that's not important. That's not important. The point is I was shown the respect that I most certainly have not deserved or earned, but I very much demand. So it's great to be back. I'm very happy to be talking about the Pistons. It's been a weird playoffs. We've seen so many strange blowouts over this last week, especially. Feels like since that Suns game, Game 7 debacle, there haven't really been any compelling games so far in these conference finals. Compelling series, perhaps, in the East, but not any really compelling games. So it's nice to have a little something to talk about with the Pistons, especially as the draft heats up. I didn't have any time to react to them getting the 5th pick. I was a little bit devastated, but I expected it. So let's get into it, guys.
That sounds like a plan. Let's get right into it. But first, a word from our sponsors at BetOnline. And our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments for the NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball, fights, and NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all sports wagering needs, including live betting and the fan favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's really easy to get started. Head on over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today. Use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that's BLEAV to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. And now where our podcast officially starts, we'll be getting right into it. We didn't have Jasper last week to talk about the draft. Share the devastation of getting the 5th pick in the draft. So our first topic, we're going to talk about, of course, the NBA draft. And the Pistons roster is far from a finished product. Other than Cade Cunningham and maybe Sadiq Bey, you're looking at a bunch of players that have some sort of expendable value. And if you really push me, I would say that so does Sadiq Bey. Point being, the roster has a lot of work to do before we can call it set in stone. So when we look at, and Aaron and I talked a lot about the typical prospects that we're going to see at 5. Should the Pistons be drafting for the best fit with the current guys on this team, or should they be looking at the highest possible ceiling with the 5th pick? But actually, before that, because Jasper, you weren't here last week, do you want to share any initial thoughts that you had about the Pistons getting the 5th pick and really the 1 through 4? Because Sacramento moving up to 4, as we noted last week, makes things very interesting.
Yeah, certainly. I'm glad I got a little bit of time actually to think about it and digest the 5th pick before coming on the podcast, because I think everybody at first, when you saw that, there's that initial inevitable Detroit doom and gloom reaction. It's like we can never, ever, ever get anything good. And the one time we do get something good, it's followed up by dropping down to 2 spots in the draft the next year. Of course. And now you're stuck not with like a Paolo Banchero, not with a Jabari Smith, not a Chet Holmgren, but somebody in that second tier prospect, your Jaden Ivey, your Keegan Murray, something like that. But I don't think that this should change the Pistons' outlook whatsoever. We've said it really since day one. Aaron, I think you and I have certainly been in lockstep, and Mike, you as well. The Pistons have to take the most talented player available in this draft. That has not changed because they got the 5th pick instead of the 1st pick. They got the 1st pick, I'd say take Chet Holmgren because I think that's the most talented player in this draft. And with number 5, I think they should follow the exact same thinking. Now, my problem here is that when you get into that 5th pick kind of range, you have players that are certainly more of unknowns, and you have players with flaws that are a little bit more obvious and a little less easily, remedied. I think about somebody like Shaedon Sharpe. I don't really know who I would take with this 5th pick. I'm sorry. If I'm being completely honest, because Shaedon Sharpe is a player right in there who has all these physical tools. If you've seen his high school tape, he certainly fits the mold of what you would think an NBA player is going to be at that shooting guard position. But I have no idea what the heck he is because I haven't seen him play meaningful games in almost 2 years now. So I do think that the Pistons should absolutely take the most talented player possible with this 5th overall pick. I'm not sure I know who that player is, and maybe that sounds like a cop-out, but I also think that that's a very reasonable position for Pistons fans to take because, frankly, you're in a position where you don't have all the variables at your disposal.
Yeah, I think.
I'm sorry, Aaron. Go ahead.
I was just kind of going to piggyback off of what Jasper was talking about here. And I'm in agreement that the Pistons should be taking best player available. I think when you're drafting for fit, you need to be a team that is definitely further along in the rebuild process, that has more of the core of your roster solidified for the future. And while outside of, Cade Cunningham, that's not necessarily the case with the Pistons. They do have young pieces that, and this is the important word, could be a part of their future moving forward. Killian Hayes, Sadiq Bey, Isaiah Stewart, guys like that. Those are the 3 guys from that first draft of the rebuild. And not to say that they're bad players or, they're not good enough to be on a winning team, but I just don't know if we know that yet. And I think Sadiq Bey is probably the guy that's next up on the list of guys that you're building your roster around alongside Cade Cunningham. But I don't know if I'm altering roster decisions because of Sadiq Bey. I don't know if I'm not taking a certain player in the draft because of Sadiq Bey. I think if there's a player that the Pistons feel is the most talented and has the highest ceiling, they need to disregard the fit because this is a team that does not have enough talent to win enough games. They're not a playoff team. They are pieces away. They need to be stockpiling on guys that have all-star potential, that can change the landscape of this team. And I think that's where you look at guys like Jaden Ivey or Shaedon Sharpe. There's some other players that, might have the high talent, maybe not the highest, but could step in and be an immediate fit with the team, like a Keegan Murray or a Benedict Mathurin. I think the Pistons should be drafting best player available. You might still think that that's Keegan Murray or Mathurin or somebody else. But I know that there's people that have questioned the fit between Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham potentially. And I don't really see much issue with that. I think something that we tout Cade Cunningham for is his ability to kind of mesh with everyone and be able to fit alongside different types of players. And I think having a guard that can score the ball, that can get inside, that's super athletic would pair well next to Cade Cunningham. It would take some of the pressure off of him. As we know, he struggled turning the ball over a little bit last year. I think having another guard that can handle, apply rim pressure, run pick and rolls, distribute, I think that's something that would be beneficial alongside Cade Cunningham. But I'm not worrying about fit right now. I'm worrying about getting talent in the organization. The Pistons lack talent. They may have fell to 5th in the draft, but it's still an opportunity to add a high-level talent, a high-level prospect to their team. And it's important for the Pistons not to worry about fit as much as they should be worrying about the potential of the player that they select.
And Aaron, those are not mutually exclusive as well. And I think we need to point that out too. Look, if you think Keegan Murray is the best player for your team in this draft, if you're Troy Weaver, which, hey, look, based on a lot of things we have heard out of James Edwards III, out of Amari from the Free Press, like, this is absolutely something that is a very real possibility. Now, the Kings being at 4 potentially complicates that, because somebody like Keegan Murray potentially fits them better than somebody like Jaden Ivey. We don't necessarily know that. But look, if you're Troy Weaver and you say, hey, we're taking Keegan Murray because we think he's the most talented player in this draft, and he also at the same time makes somebody like Jeremy Grant more expendable in a trade, well, hey, that's fine too. But I do agree with you. Yes, the priority has to be talent. If fit comes alongside that, that's just great. And I have no problem building your strategy post-draft off of the fit with the players that you have taken in this draft. But I think you're certainly correct. That has to be the fit. And frankly, the Pistons roster is not in a position where, somebody like Jaden Ivey coming in, somebody like Benedict Mathurin coming in, is going to be displacing a player that absolutely needs to be getting all this playing time over them. Like, there are no sacred cows on this roster outside of Cade Cunningham. I think we're all in agreement on that.
So I'm going to ask another question of what we sort of discussed last week a little bit. Aaron and I both gave a pretty hearty no. Is there anybody in this draft, obviously outside of the top 3, because we don't think that Orlando, OKC, or Houston are going to be trading out of the top 3. There was some weird report that the Rockets are open to trading 3, but I think that's BS. But is there anybody in the draft that you feel that the Pistons need to move up to 4?
To 4? No. Because
like anybody that you don't want the Kings to get,
no, it's the same reason why I don't have a strong opinion on who they should take at 5. And look, you guys know me. Last year, way before the lottery even happened, I was saying Cade Cunningham. I usually have my guys in whatever draft it is. I was a huge Donovan Mitchell fan. I wanted him so badly. This is not one of those situations. Everybody has the star potential. Everybody has that really low floor, and all of these prospects are wildly different from each other. There is not a lot of similarities between Benedict Mathurin, Keegan Murray, and Jaden Ivey, in my opinion. Like, really, like, what is the common denominator between all 3 of those? I don't know. One of them can't really shoot. The other one's like they're all late bloomers. I guess that's maybe it. But yeah, no matter what you're doing there, like, you're taking somebody that's going to have flaws, and you're taking somebody that you're going to be having to, it's going to be a risk. Like, the thing with, I guess, Keegan Murray, you can talk yourself into is he's the least amount of risk, potentially. He's that lunch pail kind of guy that Troy Weaver likes, very much about his business, quiet, not a big show off, but the production is just there. For me, at a certain point, yeah, those guys are good, but at a certain point, you do need that flash. You do need that extra burst. And that's how I can talk myself into somebody like a Jaden Ivey. But at the same time, Jaden Ivey lacks that certain kind of shooting ability that I'm looking for. Well, then Benedict Mathurin comes in. Well, but Benedict Mathurin can't really create for others. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's no real answer here. There certainly is no better answer at 4, in my opinion, and definitely not anybody on the roster that would be worthy of being traded to move up in the draft that I would want to do so.
Okay. So if you're the Sacramento Kings, who would you be picking? Because we both sort of decided last week that, the Kings are they're a total wild card. They are every single year.
Yeah,
but
like a dog with rabies.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know what they're going to do, like what they're going to bite or
no, and they might drop dead. They might drop dead at any second. So
it's
watch
very
out.
possible. And I think it's likely that I would give it a 50-50 chance at this point that they trade out of that pick. They're a team that's trying to make the playoffs. I think that if they dangle the fourth pick, it's not super desirable, but they can dangle the fourth pick and they could try to get, like a veteran player. I think that's on the table, 50-50 chance that happens, because and we talked about this and Aaron has tweeted about it. The Kings can't really afford to wait for a young guy to get good, like a Shaden Sharp. Sure, he has a high ceiling, we think, but how much time are they willing to wait to get him to that point? And Keegan Murray seems like an awfully safe pick for them because he is the most polished, safest pick. And sometimes the Kings just need to do what's safe. So if you're the Kings, what are you doing at 4? Because that directly correlates to what the Pistons do at 5.
Oh God, I thank God there's some times where I'm like, oh man, being a Pistons fan is hard. And then it's like, oh yeah, I could be a Kings fan.
Right, you could be a Kings fan.
It could be so much worse. I'm kind of interested to hear what you guys have to say on this. I guess if I'm in that position, Keegan Murray to me does fit a need. And I think he also is a guy who can immediately come in and help you. Sometimes it's best to just not overthink it. You know what I mean? That was the problem with like the Sekou Doumbouya pick where they had Brandon Clark available. And it's like, you are a team that desperately needs a backup power forward. You have a player right here in the draft that can step in and be your backup power forward behind your oft injured Blake Griffin. Just do that. Make the smart pick. You're here to win. Make winning so if there's not a trade for them to get a borderline all-star player, it's funny because we said, we wouldn't make that trade, but boy, they sure could use a Jeremy Grant. Moving back one pick in this draft, I don't think would be a downside for them whatsoever. But if I'm the Pistons, I don't really necessarily see how that's all that compelling. Unless maybe you're getting a future first rounder back as well. But I don't know. That's a whole different discussion.
That could be a lottery ticket.
But that seems crazy to me. Anyway, I think for me, yeah, I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. But if I'm the Kings, I'm not overthinking this. I'm either taking somebody safe like Keegan Murray, somebody who can help me right now and also has that high level talent, or I'm demanding a borderline all-star level player to move out of that pick. But like Aaron, I want to know where Aaron you come down on this.
Yeah. All right, Aaron, you go first.
Well, we did kind of talk about this last week, and I think we both said Keegan Murray if they end up taking the pick.
That is correct.
But I think we also said that they should be trying to trade this pick, because they could probably get something for 4. Because I think there will be a team that would be willing to trade up for a Jaden Ivey or Shaden Sharp, and if I'm Sacramento and I can get a nice haul for number 4 and they can get a guy that's going to help them win now, or a couple guys that are going to help them win now, like that's got to be appealing to me. But if they're dead set on making this pick, and if the reports are true that they want to, make the playoffs next year, it's got to be Keegan Murray for them just based off the fit alone. They have De'Aaron Fox, they have Davion Mitchell, they have Sabonis. You can pair your forward spot between Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray, and then bring whoever you got off the bench, Trey Lyles, which is funny, but whatever else that they, put together in the offseason. And you kind of have a grouping there that puts them in a better position to win. Mitchell came up big time last year after they traded Tyrese Halliburton. Murray's a guy that can come in and shoot, defend, score for you right away, can play big minutes. And you have Sabonis, you have Fox, like you have the pieces there that you should be more competitive than you have been in years past. So if they're looking to make the playoffs and that's what their goal is, that's where I draft for fit. That's where I draft Keegan Murray rather than taking an upside play in Jaden Ivey, who maybe doesn't fit when you already have a pair of guards on your roster.
So in that case, then, if you're the Pistons, let's just say they take Keegan Murray and you're the Pistons, and you really I'm not even going to talk about Shaden Sharp because, again, I don't know anything about it. But let's just say the choices between Jaden Ivey and Benedict Mathurin. Who are you guys interested in there? Because I could talk myself into either guy. I think Jaden Ivey is that kind of explosive athlete that in my mind works perfectly next to Cade. He's comfortable playing off ball. He can create a little bit. Yes, we don't know about the shot, but like, hey, on paper, that's the kind of guy you want to put next to a player like Cade Cunningham. On the other hand, Benedict Mathurin's got that dog in him. And that just doesn't this just feel like the perfect kind of draft for somebody like a Benedict Mathurin to come out and like the second best player in it, getting picked number 6 overall, something like that. I don't know. There's just something about him that really, he's got that dog in him. He's got that shot. He's got that shot making ability. He's got that same kind of explosive athleticism as well. A little bit bigger than Jaden Ivey, but totally a different kind of player, not a creator for others. So I guess I'm wondering with you guys, Mike, like who interests you more there if Keegan Murray is off the board?
For the Pistons, right?
Yeah.
I still like Jaden Ivey. I could be talked into Shaden Sharp. I'm in the same boat that you're in. We just haven't seen him play enough, and that inherent, there is risk there in that. I don't doubt that he's got, top 3 ceiling. But for me, it just seems easier to take Jaden Ivey. I think he does fit well alongside Cade Cunningham. I think his ability to, the shooting is definitely a problem. And it was a problem through most of the Big Ten tournament and into the NCAA tournament. But the speed and athleticism seems like, and the ability to get downhill, the Pistons don't have a whole lot of players who can do that and collapse a defense. Not that there's any, like plethora of shooters around to kick it out to right now. But I think that those two qualities would be very beneficial. And you hope that the shot comes around at some point. I would do Sharp 2 and probably Mathurin 3. But this conversation might change a little bit if the Pistons do end up trading Jeremy Grant and get another pick in the top, I don't know, let's just say top 10. They get another top 10 pick, whether that be Portland, Washington, or, even the Sacramento Kings. So I think the calculus changes with a trade, but if I had to pick, I would still be on Jaden Ivey at 5 if he is there.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Mike here. Jaden Ivey's, in my opinion, the most talented prospect in this draft outside of those top 3 guys. I buy into him being able to play on and off the ball. I buy into the 3-point shot improving. I mean, just from watching film on him, he's a guy that better shot selection will vastly improve his shooting numbers, specifically from outside the arc. He just has a tendency, at least he did, in college, to bring the ball up the court early in the shot clock, settle for a long 3. It's obviously not a good shot. And I mentioned this last week on the show, but that's something that could, if he eliminates that type of shot from his arsenal, that's something that turns his 36% 3-point shooting to 38 or 39% 3-point shooting. And then we're not necessarily talking about his shooting as a concern point for his future, but that's also a problem that he is deciding to take those shots. So the decision-making, honestly, in that regard, in terms of his shooting decisions, is maybe more worrisome than his actual shooting percentage. I mean, it's a guy that took a 10% leap in his 3-point shot from his freshman to sophomore season. But I buy into him defensively. He does have some woes on that side of the court, specifically off the ball. He tends to get lost staring at the basketball, and that allows guys to get open on the outside, especially if he's not playing on the ball. You get matched up against a shooter and you get caught, ball watching, and that shooter gets open. That's going to be a nightmare. But I buy into his fit. I buy into the shooting, his electricity on the court, the way he gets up and down, the way he can get a rebound and get to the other side of the court and finish with athleticism is unlike anything that the Pistons have on the roster. It's obviously very similar to a guy like John Morant, and we saw the season that he just had in the NBA. I think that having an explosive, electric fast-paced guy that can get to the rim is imperative for teams, and Jaden Ivey would walk in the door and immediately be that for the Detroit Pistons. So he's definitely my favorite prospect outside of those top three guys that we expect to be off the board for whenever the Pistons draft on June 23rd. But he is a guy that I think would be a great option for Detroit, and he's the guy that if I was picking at number 5 and he was available, that's who I would be taking.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think Jaden Ivey could instantly bring to this team, even if the three-point shot is a work in progress, is that transition offense. And the Pistons have just not been a good transition team for ever. I literally, maybe since like Grant Hill was in the uniform. Last year, they were pretty mediocre. They were 41st percentile in transition offense in the league. They were middle of the pack in terms of frequency at like 15%. So I think something that he could instantly bring to them as a really different offensive look would be that explosiveness and transition. And when you have bigger athletes, let's say they do bring back somebody like Marvin Bagley, I think that Cade, Killian, and Jaden Ivey all having those options could just completely put him over the top offensively, especially when they're running and gunning. And for a team that struggled to score in the half court too, I think that could definitely be an interesting wrinkle. And like we've said, just because you're taking the most talented player possible doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to instantly fit into this team, because the fact of the matter is you won 23 games last year, and your roster, frankly, is not really all that good for somebody to have to come in and fit alongside another player. I think, yes, if I had to pick somebody myself as well, I'd probably go Ivy. I could see the argument for Sharp just based on physical tools. A guy having a 50-inch vertical leap is just, that's absurd. But yeah, I think for me, yes, if you're going most talent, it's probably got to be Jaden Ivey, right?
I certainly think so. And to your credit with the transition, the Pistons were 17th in the league in points per 100 possessions in transition play. Their highest that I'm seeing is they were 8th in 2014-15. So, yeah, the transition
Brandon
offense.
Jennings.
Yeah.
No, that's it. It was because of Brandon Jennings. That's exactly why I forgot about that.
They were also 8th in 2013-14.
Mm-hmm.
They took a little bit of a dive in 15-16. But anyway, so yeah, I agree. And, I had talked about the speed, the athleticism. I think all those things are directly helped greatly by having a guy like Jaden Ivey on the floor. I do like Benedict Mathurin, and if the Pistons get back at 7, boy, getting Ivey and Ben Mathurin would be very, very. I would like that a lot.
I wouldn't complain, but that's certainly something we're planning on talking about more next week.
Yes,
especially in terms of Jeremy Grant potentially getting moved, and especially in regards to that Portland pick. Although, as we've been discussing for weeks now, there could be other moves available for Detroit this offseason, both in the draft and in terms of, talented players. So.
Yep, absolutely. So you had mentioned Jeremy Grant. You guys have any other thoughts on if players like Cade and Sadiq and Jeremy Grant impact this kind of decision? I know it's early, and we've talked about trades, and we've talked about, Cade is the one to build around. But does Sadiq Bey or Killian Hayes, impact any of the decision making?
No,
not
at all. Sadiq Bey is a good player, and he showed some nice things in year 2. But no, if you have a chance to, whether it's in the draft or free agency, land a small forward or forward in general that you think changes the landscape of your team moving forward, you shouldn't be hesitating for 1 second because you have Sadiq Bey on the roster. And that's like, it sounds mean, but that's just, I'm not trying to be like, he is a good player, but you have to get talent, and you can play forwards you can play guys together that maybe you wouldn't have 20 years ago. It's a positionless game. I can't worry about a guy that might be good, might top out as a 6-man on a real good team or a real good playoff team. I have to get talent in the door, and that's not to take away from Saddiq Bey, because I do think he's a promising player, and I think he can be a starter on a playoff team, a starter on a good team. But I don't know if it's for sure. Whereas I'm very, very confident in what Cade Cunningham is and what he can be, in the type of role he can have on a very good team in the NBA. And certainly nobody else on this roster, like a Killian Hayes or Isaiah Stewart or anyone else you want to go down that list, deserves that type of recognition either. Like, the Pistons need to be getting talent in the door, and Cade is the only guy that they should be worrying about as to what the type of fit is, or if he's gonna, butt heads with Cunningham at all.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make, Aaron, because just because we're saying we're not making these decisions based upon somebody like Saddiq Bey or Jeremy Grant does not mean that we're saying bring in somebody to get rid of Jeremy Grant or Saddiq Bey. It just means that these guys can be moved around. Just because, Keegan Murray has small forward next to his position on the draft, NBA draft.net, doesn't mean that you have to bring him in and all of a sudden we can't play him, Saddiq Bey, or Jeremy Grant together. It just means that you have to find different places for different players. For God's sake, we saw Hamidou Diallo, shooting guard, go to Hamidou Diallo, power forward last year. So 100%, you're correct, Aaron. Positionless basketball is the way to go. Just because we're not making decisions based upon Saddiq Bey, Jeremy Grant, does not mean that those guys are not going to still factor into the future of this franchise if you do bring in a player like Benedict Mathurin or Keegan Murray. And although I'll say this, Killian Hayes most certainly does not impact that, even more so. Double for him.
I just kind of wanted to throw that in there and see how everybody would react. And it was a pretty emphatic, pretty straightforward, bland no. That it makes sense. I mean, we have talked about Killian Hayes a lot, almost ad nauseum at this point. So let's just go ahead and move on to our next topic. And our final topic is that the Pistons young guys are already back at work. So in a story from the Detroit Free Press, there was some discussions about, and there was some evidence of 11 players back at the facility working out and training. The season's only about a month out from ending for the Pistons. So how encouraging is it to see these young guys back and already getting prepared for next season? I mean, it can only be good, right?
Yeah, it's good that they're taking a serious approach and trying to build off of, what was a disappointing season last year, if we're just being honest. Like, I mean, if you go back to last summer, we were talking about this team as a team that could compete for a play-in spot if everything went the right way. And obviously that didn't happen. There was a lot of injuries. There was some lack of development across the board for this roster. And it's good to see that some of these core guys are already back in the gym, working together, training. I think it's very, very important. And I'm not sure that, obviously it's kind of rah-rah stuff to just talk about this and be like, oh yeah, that's good. Like, obviously it's good, but I don't know if this was the same, I don't think we would have seen this from some of these rosters, maybe of years past in different front offices, maybe with some of these different guys that were on these teams years ago. To see a young team show this type of commitment, I think is what stands out the most, because I don't think we're going back to Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson and those teams of those years of, getting together early on in the offseason and training. It's important that they're doing it because, these guys have the potential to play together and be a part of a core moving forward. If you're looking at Cunningham, Bey, Isaiah Stewart. I mean, Bey and Stewart were on Team USA's select team last year. So obviously there are high hopes for them. And the Pistons have talked about that as guys, or as a note of like how talented these guys are and the potential that they have. Like, look, they were good enough to play and get invited to the Team USA select team. Like, obviously they're a part of our core, and it's important that they're working together. I mean, I think it's just as important that they, some of those guys were at the Celtics game together, Cade and Stewart, Killian, and Dwayne Casey was there. Like, that was good to see. And I know it was talked about, how they were all kind of going there for different reasons. Like Hayes and Stewart were there meeting with Puma, and Cade Cunningham was, just going to the game to go. And Casey said, hey, I'll go too. Like, I think that's great. I think it's neat that they got to go to a playoff game. And although they weren't playing, they saw that type of atmosphere, the hostility from the crowd. Like they saw how those things play together. And we've seen a lot of different stuff from even just from social media that these guys are in Michigan, in Detroit. I mean, we saw that picture of a bunch of guys at the Detroit Tigers game. And I know Stewart was in that picture, Luka Garza, some guys from the G League roster. So it's good that these guys are sticking together, working out, training and whatnot, because there's an expectation of legitimate growth with this team next year. And if there isn't, I think some of these guys' futures are really going to be in question with this franchise, because it'll be year 3 of that of the initial start to the rebuild, where Hayes, Stewart, and Bay have been with the team. You know, you'll have a second season of Cunningham. If Luka Garza is still around, if Saban Lee's still around, it'll be his 3rd year in the league. So the potential of this group is going to come into question next year whenever the season ends for Detroit. And, you know, working now to build chemistry, to get better, it's important for them long-term to be a sustainable group and to get better, to become that eventual playoff team that the expectation is that they'll become.
Yeah, I don't think, any reasonable person would say that this is a bad thing, right? But on the other hand, we do have an entertainment product, gentlemen. So I'd have to say this is a disaster for the Pistons. This is one of the worst things I think I've ever heard in my entire history as a Pistons fan. This is an absolute debacle. 11 players back at the facility. The roster is 15 players. Where were the other 4? Why weren't they invited? Aaron, you talked about how the Pistons were at the Boston Celtics, a historical rival of this franchise. They bought tickets. They supported them. They gave them their hard-earned money from Tom Gores, gave it to them willingly, and the head coach too, to just go and sit on the sidelines. Are those the kind of players you want on your team? I don't want players that are comfortable sitting on the sidelines and chairs. I want players that are in the game. If they wanted it, they should have put on their uniforms and they should have rushed onto the court, just like those ladies in Minnesota crushing eggs and gluing their hands to stanchions or whatever. For me, guys, I have to say, and this is just, it's a debacle. What else can there be said? Isaiah Livers was there. Killian Hayes was there. I don't believe Sadiq Bey was there, though. And where is he? Why is he being left out? I didn't see Frank Jackson either. Is he being excluded because of his religious beliefs? These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves, gentlemen. And until I get some answers, I'm very, very disturbed.
I need a drop. I need a drop of the Frank Jackson part.
Yeah,
killing me. That killed me.
Came out of nowhere.
Jasper Apollonia, aka Skip Bayless. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
the Frank Jackson part killed me right there.
They call me the Alex Jones of Brooklyn, folks. I'm out here asking the hard questions. What are they putting in the water?
Well, that's why we needed him back. That's why we needed Jasper back.
Yeah.
Well,
doesn't Frank Jackson have a contract to be picked up yet?
Well, I'm just saying. I'm just asking the hard questions. I'm just saying. God. Game 6 was a false flag.
Wow, we really need the draft to get here. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys, but I did need to get. Aaron talking about these guys getting together and having fun and learning, it just makes me sick to my stomach. And I don't know how much more I can take. It's this relentless pro Pistons propaganda. You're not willing to ask the hard questions.
That's what we do.
Not willing to dig deeper. I have to put my $200 and something thousand Syracuse journalism degree to you finally. Oh God, what am I doing with my life? Can we end this podcast, gentlemen? Things are going downhill rapidly.
How many weeks away? We're just under a month out of the draft.
Yeah, we're about a month out. So
and
we
we're
need to
about
do something for 3 weeks.
And we're about 3 minutes out from
Yeah.
completely losing my mind.
Well, that may have already happened. I mean, we may have just witnessed the explosion happen.
Mm.
Yeah, this is obviously a good thing to have them all getting it. I thought it was interesting that Isaiah Livers was there. I thought that was, I guess, just interesting. But yeah, not a bad thing. What has been bad is the Eastern Conference Finals. That has been bad. Not an interesting game yet.
Mike, I have a little bit of money on the Heat tonight, and boy, I mean, this game should be a bloodbath, but the Heat are plus 130 right now, and they're playing at home, and these teams have switched wins in each game. I don't know, man. I'm feeling like a fool for betting on the home team that's plus 130 right now, but who knows? This has been a weird series. They've all been blowouts for the most part. Same with the Golden State series. So hopefully the finals will be a little bit better. It does definitely look like Golden State is going to be one of those two teams right now, but we will see.
Yeah. And Robert Williams and Marcus Smart are both playing.
I think
Tyler
Robert Williams
is not playing.
Well, that's actually almost seems like a bonus for them
because
that's more Oladipo. Yeah, more Oladipo playing great defense. But I will say Robert Williams playing for the Celtics, I mean, you could see the difference. When he's on the floor for them, it is way harder for Bam to get anything going than when he's off the floor. So, I also wouldn't be shocked to just watch Boston win these next two games kind of comfortably.
Yeah, the Heat have always been sort of confounding. They have a lot of G League two-way contract type players that are producing and produced all year. And then like Max Strus was just a cardio queen last time out. He recorded no stats, but I think he had like 18 minutes of time on the floor. And Gabe Vincent getting time. They just had a lot of dumb luck, it seems like, that all fit during the regular season, but then you get into crunch time, and Boston just has more of those players that can buckle down, and Marcus Smart and Robert Williams certainly kind of fit that bill there, and Jason Tatum has been much better. So yeah, it's look, if I had to guess right now, I mean, the Warriors are up 3-1. Not that they have any precedent of blowing 3-1 leads ever. And Boston, I think, has the momentum going in. Starting to get a little healthier. And you're right, Robert Williams on the floor with Al Horford, or instead of Al Horford, totally changes Bam Adebayo entirely. Aaron, do you have any thoughts on the sudden topic 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals?
Every game has been a blowout one way or the other, it seems like. So I agree with how boring it's been, but hopefully tonight will be better, because I actually plan on sitting down and being able to watch the full extent of this game. So I'd like to see a close competitive game where both sides are playing good basketball and it's not 82 to 123.
Yeah, you and me both.
Really, that's all I have. That's the type of series this has been. It's been awful. I really don't have much to say besides that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fellas, good podcast. It's been 3 minutes and Jasper hasn't gone totally AWOL, so I think he's settled down. Do we have any other final thoughts here before we wrap up this edition of Palace of Pistons Podcast?
Well, we've already kind of talked about a topic for next week that I think a lot of people are going to be excited for us to talk about, because it's a situation that a lot of people would like to see play out for Detroit. So we're already planning next week's show. That's how dedicated we are to our listeners, who have actually absolutely killed it in terms of support of our show lately, both on YouTube and wherever else. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to our show, the support has been absolutely amazing. So certainly appreciate that. We've got draft profiles, scouting reports that we're working on right now that are in the works that'll come out on palaceofpistons.com over the next few weeks leading up to the NBA draft. So appreciate everyone's support. Hopefully you guys continue to support us. And that's all I got for this week's show. It's been a pleasure, boys.
Wow. In and out. Aaron is like Mr. Hit the quota on read this and go there, and thanks for the support. He's got like the perfect outro. It's like he has not an index card just ready to go.
Everything I say is quoted out in front of me. It's like I have a teleprompter in front of me. That's how I operate every show. I type out what I'm going to say 2 hours before the show starts.
Well, somebody has to be prepared because it's certainly not Jasper or I.
Oh, God, no. Oh, sweet, sassy Molassy. Absolutely not. Y'all have a wonderful night.
Exactly. Well, for my co-host, Aaron Johnson, Jasper Apollonia, I am Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. And thank you to our sponsor, once again, BetOnline. If you're interested, you can use our promo code BLEAV, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with BetOnline. So I'd like to once again thank everybody for joining us on this edition. We'll see you all next time.